My name is Patricia, and since my earliest memories, responsibility has been my constant companion, like a shadow watching my every move. There was no peace or silence in our house. It was always boiling like a volcano, from which the streams of seething life did not subside, crashing down on us. My two younger brothers, Mike and David, ran around the house like whirlwinds, creating a mess that I then had to fix. Everything I did wasn't just part of my daily routine, it was a lifestyle from which there was no escape. And at one point she appeared, Sarah, my younger sister, whom I remember as something completely different, something new, but at the same time alien and unusual. She came into our lives when I was 10, and from the very beginning she was like a foreign body in our strict, almost military order. "Patricia, darling, could you help change Sarah's diaper?" Mom shouted it with a tiredness that was hard to hide, in a voice worn out by the labor of 2 shifts. I dropped everything I was doing and, without hesitation, rushed to help. It was our custom not to ask, but to do, not to demand, but to give. We all took part in taking care of the youngest, except for Sarah herself. She was just a kid, and it was decided that she should not participate in anything. Dad always brushed off any comments, saying, "Leave her alone, she's just a kid," and we put up with that, realizing that the adult world is so designed that we can't do without it. My parents worked themselves to exhaustion. Dad worked at a construction site, hauling out heavy materials, mats and bricks, and Mom cleaned houses, earning her last pennies so that we could not only survive, but also feel like people. They did everything possible to have food on our table, and dreams continued to live in our hearts, despite every day that we were going through, almost on the verge of survival. I watched them give their last strength, and I realized that in this life there is no other way but to work without thinking about what will happen tomorrow. Mike and David, my brothers, like me, got into this unsolvable tangle of responsibilities and privileges, because Sarah, despite all her moods and tantrums, was always the center of attention. We looked at each other at the dinner table when Sarah started demanding something for herself again, threw a tantrum, getting what she wanted, and her parents, not having the strength to fight, eventually gave in. I understood that I needed to change something in my life, to break out of this vicious circle where all you need is to survive without thinking about more. And so, as soon as I graduated from high school, I made the decision to work. The local diner where I found my first job wasn't perfect, couldn't boast of any glitz or glamour, but it was the first step in this long and difficult journey. Every penny I earned went into my college piggy bank, small and inconspicuous, hidden in my closet, which I counted late at night, dreaming that one day, when I had saved enough money, I could start studying at a community college. My dreams seemed far away, but I didn't give up. I knew that every day brings me closer to my goal. After a year of work, the managers noticed my dedication. They began to trust me more, and I gratefully and resolutely took on new responsibilities. I moved from a simple job at the cash register to accounting. Day by day, step by step, my college dreams started to seem not so far away, and so I signed up for evening classes. Work and study, it seemed that it was impossible, that I couldn't stand the strain, but the inner urge to continue, despite my fatigue and doubts, was stronger. Sometimes, at night, I would fall asleep right over my textbooks, but the next morning I would wake up with renewed vigor to go back to my shift. It was excruciating, but worth it. At times like this, I couldn't help but think about Sarah. Unlike me, she could sleep until noon, skip school when she wanted to, and not face the consequences. She was always the center of attention, and her endless moods seemed like something that could be forgiven. And I was like a stone, having no right to be tired or weak. This fueled my desire for success. I wanted to prove to everyone that I could be different, that I could achieve more, that I didn't have to wait for everything to work itself out. "You're going to burn out," Dad once told me, finding me doing my accounting homework at midnight. I looked up from my books, smiled at him with a tired but determined smile, and said, "Maybe, but I'm going somewhere, Dad. I promise you that my college degree will open doors for me, and I won't stop there." And it wasn't just a verbal promise. It was my life, my decision, and I couldn't afford to go out of my way. When I was finally offered a job at the First National Bank, I felt that this was the beginning. Junior analyst, new job, new prospects. I plunged into it with the same determination that I had when I graduated from high school. My knowledge and experience helped me to adapt quickly and get deeper into my work. My successes did not go unnoticed, and a few months later my supervisor took me aside. "Patricia, I've never seen anyone grasp things so quickly," she told me with a slight surprise in her voice. "Keep it up, and you'll go far." I kept walking, and I was not mistaken. My talents were shown not only in numbers, but also in the ability to find a common language with people. While others complained about office politics, I easily coped with it, and all this thanks to the life lessons I learned as a child, managing our family. These skills may not seem so important for a career in banking, but for me they have become a real key to success. Meanwhile, Mike and David, my brothers, left, starting their own lives, something different from what I had left behind, and their absence from our house did not seem tragic to me. On the contrary, it was liberating. They weren't as attached to our family as I was, and now that they were gone, I suddenly felt how much had changed in our house. The empty rooms, the absence of their noisy footsteps, the endless arguments. Sarah, on the other hand, stayed here, and her life remained unchanged, leading the same disorderly, free, but at the same time irresponsible lifestyle that she always led, without feeling any burden of obligations that I so carefully carried on myself. Mom called me periodically with new news about how Sarah had disappeared again, and once again she only returned in the morning, and knowing that nothing would change, I didn't even want to listen to her say, "She was gone again until 3 a.m. Patricia, I'm worried, but you know what she's like." I knew about the parade of her boyfriends, and the bad grades, and how her life didn't have a clear direction, and that became her norm. But now, when I started living my own life, when I had my own apartment, my own job, my own goals, these worries about Sarah were no longer mine. I learned to set my own boundaries and live by my own rules, ceasing to be a permanent guardian, not feeling the obligation to always carry the whole burden of family worries. I was not ready to return to my old role, and it seemed to me that, finally, I had earned the right to my own life, to my own space. But, as it always happens in such families, when one of us wants to get rid of obligations, there is always someone who decides that you must return to your usual role. And so, a call came that changed everything. Sarah's mom, now pregnant herself, called me one morning and informed me that her father had left for Arizona, saying he wanted nothing to do with it. I squeezed the phone tighter, as if it might burst at some point from these words, and in response I heard her timid, "We will help her. We will raise the child, of course. What else can we do?" The words sounded like a sentence, as if everything I had built was crumbling in an instant, because Sarah, despite her 20 years, was still a precious child for her, and for me it was already unbearable. Mom continued, "You'll help too, won't you, Patricia? You're so good with the kids, you come over on weekends, don't you?" I felt like it was becoming difficult for me to breathe, like an invisible heaviness that was squeezing my chest, weighing down all my thoughts. I started making excuses, urgent work projects, professional development courses, meetings with clients, anything to avoid spending my precious free time taking care of a child who, it seemed to me, was another storm in the ocean of my life. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but now that I had my own life, I couldn't afford to get caught up in that routine again. "I don't understand you anymore," my mother said during one particularly tense phone conversation, and her voice was full of despair, as if I had become a stranger to her. "You used to be so helpful, always ready to help." I leaned back in my chair, thought for a couple of seconds, and then replied, "I used to be a child who had to help." My words sounded cold, no matter how hard I tried to hide my resentment. Now I'm an adult, I have my own life. I was ready to continue, but I felt the topic engulfing me, and all I wanted was for it to stop. "Family, Mom, family works both ways, doesn't it?" I added bitterly, feeling like every word was burning me. Have you forgotten how much money I send you every month? It's money that usually shuts you up, at least for a while. I've never complained, I've never told you how much I'm giving away, but I felt like this burden became a part of me. The checks I wrote were substantial enough to cover Sarah's prenatal care, then the baby supplies, and then the running costs. But despite all this, I still didn't get approval because they were always unhappy. Once, over coffee, Aunt Lisa, who has never been shy about expressing her thoughts, told me that they, my parents, were talking behind my back, that I had become heartless. I slowly stirred my coffee, watching the cream dissolve into the dark liquid, and restrained myself from breaking down. They say you've changed, you've become cold. I couldn't hold back the answer and looked her straight in the eye. Ungrateful? For what? For the privilege of raising their other children, for the opportunity to raise their grandson now? I could feel the rage growing inside me. I deserve everything I have, Aunt Lisa, everything. My life is the result of my efforts. I decided to no longer hide what everyone has known for a long time. I can no longer be who they want me to be. I had earned my place in this life, and now that I was offered a promotion to senior analyst, I felt like my life was continuing to change. The salary increased again, and with it the checks that I sent home increased again, but I firmly adhered to my boundaries. No days off, no emergency childcare, no last-minute favors. Let them call me a pain in the ass. I've spent too much time being responsible forever, and now I deserve my time, my decisions, my life. My dating app on my phone, which I installed as a way to pass the time alone, worked quietly and modestly, as expected, until one day, on that rainy Tuesday, a new message popped up. James. There was something in his profile that immediately caught my attention, not just another set of memorized phrases and empty words like everyone else's, but a sincere, almost philosophical smile that wasn't trying to be sexy, but was just real. Maybe it was the fact that he didn't expose his naked bodies from gyms like many others, but focused on his profession, on the fact that he really works in finance, which is like a familiar and understandable world for me. When I read his message, I suddenly realized that it wasn't written with the aim of making an impression. It didn't have this mundane falsehood in it, which usually so poisonously seeps into words. It seemed to me that he was sincere, his message looked casual, and I felt like I was drawn to get to know him. He wrote that he actually works as an investment consultant, and that maybe we could talk about the market over a cup of coffee, and I thought, smiling, that it wouldn't be so bad. And so, coffee turned into dinner, and dinner into a longer evening, and as if I hadn't even noticed how 2 years had passed, and I was already completely absorbed in this man, and relationships that I never thought I'd have time for suddenly became a part of my life. He proved to be patient and understanding, so much so that even after the most exhausting days of work, when I returned home exhausted, he managed to make me laugh and forget about everything. One day, after another walk in the park, when we were wandering in the rain and laughing trying not to get wet, he said something that made me think. I never thought that I would find someone who understands not only compound interest, but also my terrible jokes. I was just laughing, and he, knowing that I don't like excessive pretentiousness, made an offer. It wasn't some kind of special event, with a ring in a box, not against the background of a sunset or in a posh restaurant, no, it was in my apartment, after a dinner that I had prepared myself. He just handed me the ring and said, "I can't imagine my life without you." And I said yes, without giving him a chance to finish his sentence. It was impulsive, maybe, but I was absolutely sure. I didn't expect everything to happen so quickly, but it didn't matter to me. I knew that this was exactly the person I wanted to be with. When I told my mom about it, she was over the moon. I realized that it was important to her that she finally saw me settling down. She looked at us, at James and me, and kept repeating tirelessly, "He's wonderful, Patricia, just look how he gets along with Tommy." She was referring, of course, to Sarah's son, my nephew, who took a liking to James at first sight. It was amazing how quickly he became friends with him, and, really, I began to notice how much James loves children, how he happily spent time with Tommy, teaching him how to throw a ball or build cubes. It all seemed so natural to me, as if James and I had always been part of this family. The whole wedding, and our marriage itself, began perfectly, without complaints, without unnecessary fuss, and most importantly, with real mutual understanding. It seemed that I had finally found my haven, my foothold in this world. But then it started. Sarah, as always, started asking questions, and even though everyone in the family thought she was so restless, it seemed to me that she saw something that we didn't notice. She was smiling, glancing meaningfully at James, and said, "Don't you think it's time, Patricia?" I stopped, looking at her as if for the first time. As if she knew something before me. And then James asked me the same thing, while we were watching Tommy running around our living room. He was old enough to play with us, and James looked at him with a special look full of some inner longing. He said, "We're not getting any younger." I sensed his concern and thought for a moment. But I continued to explain that we need to be fully prepared, that we need our own place, not this small apartment, that we need savings, time for ourselves. I refused to rush. I said that I had to feel that we were really ready, so as not to repeat the mistakes of the past. But James objected, "We're fine, we both have good jobs. What are we waiting for? When is the right time?" He was insistent, and I felt the tension building in me in response to his words, like some kind of inner barrier. I understood that he wanted to be a father, and I wasn't against it either, but now wasn't the time. "We're not ready yet." I often caught his gaze, which couldn't hide his disappointment. It was a look that at some point could have made it clear that his dreams of us becoming a family were beginning to crumble. I saw how he sometimes talked about Sarah and her life, not hiding the slight sharpness in his voice. "Your sister is doing great, but she lives with our parents and relies on their retirement savings." I felt that the tension between us continued to grow, and it was unbearably hard for me that I couldn't give him the answer he was waiting for. I didn't know what to do, and it was like clouds were gathering on the horizon that I couldn't push away. I continued to focus on my work, because the promotion I had dreamed of for so long had finally become a reality. And the feeling began to creep inside me more and more that I had to choose, to be a wife after all, or to continue building my future alone. There were too many questions that I couldn't find an answer to. This Saturday morning started like any other. I brewed coffee, sipped it slowly, enjoying rare moments of peace, and then, as always, decided to do the cleaning. It was my habit to do a general cleaning once a month, sort things out, get rid of old receipts, unnecessary papers, and those clothes that James, for some reason, left lying around, despite all my requests to keep things in order. I was sorting through his things mechanically, putting aside shirts that should have been dry cleaned long ago, sweaters that he had never worn this winter, and suddenly my fingers came across something unexpected, alien among the soft fabric. I felt for it and pulled it out into the light. It was a phone. Black, inconspicuous, without a cover, hidden deep behind his winter sweaters, as if someone deliberately wanted to avoid being found. My heart skipped a beat for a second, and then it started racing. It wasn't his work phone or his personal one, which he always left on his bedside table. It was the third one. Reserve. Hidden. I stared at him for a long time, feeling a cold lump tighten in my stomach. Then, as if guided by some instinct, my fingers slid across the screen. It was not blocked. My hand was shaking when I opened the messages, and the first thing I saw was a name that made it hard for me to breathe. Sarah. My little sister. I forced myself to read it. "I miss you. I can't wait for Saturday, when she'll be back at work." I swallowed, looking at these words, but still not fully realizing their meaning. Then I saw hundreds of other messages. Photo. Fragments of conversations. LOL, she's so stupid. Always in the office, office, office. All she cares about is her precious career. I flipped through the messages, my fingers moving on their own, and my mind did not have time to comprehend the whole picture. The timestamps went back months. It was more than an affair, more than an accidental mistake. This has been going on for a long time. And then I saw a message that made my world stop. The baby is definitely yours. The doctor confirmed it today. 12 weeks. I don't remember how I packed up, how I ran out of the apartment, how I rushed along the road, not understanding the signs and not noticing oncoming cars. I don't remember how I got to my parents' house. The only thing I remember is the phone clutched to my paper, white hand, fingers clutching it as if it were the only thing keeping me from completely falling into the abyss. Sarah was there, of course. As always, on Saturdays, she was sitting on the couch in her parents' living room, Tommy next to her, and some cartoons were flashing on the TV screen, and the whole picture looked so ordinary, so normal, that it took my breath away. I went inside, my legs were almost numb, but I made it to the coffee table and, without saying a word, dropped the phone right in front of her. Tommy flinched, and Mom reacted immediately, quickly getting up and sending him into another room. "Go play, darling," she said softly, as if nothing had happened, as if the sky hadn't collapsed. But Sarah didn't even flinch. She calmly picked up the phone, casually flipped through the messages, as if checking the weather forecast, and only then looked at me. "Well," she drawled, as if she was bored. "I think you know now." I couldn't breathe. "You're sleeping with my husband." She shrugged her shoulders. "We love each other, Patricia," she said, as if that explained everything. "Such things happen. And now that the baby is coming, James and I want to get married as soon as you stop being so complicated about it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Complicated?" I repeated, looking at her, but it was already getting dark in front of my eyes. Sarah sighed, as if I didn't understand something obvious, as if she was the one trying to explain basic things to me. "Well, yes," she said, as if she were talking to a stubborn child. "You've never wanted children anyway. You're too busy with your precious career. And James needs a real family." I turned to my parents. I waited for them to say something. Something. That they would take my side, that they would at least try to protect me, but instead my mother slowly sat down next to Sarah, took her hand and patted it, as if reassuring. "Patricia, try to be reasonable," she said softly. "Tommy needs a father. And James gets along so well with him. And now that another baby is expected, it makes sense." My voice cracked. "My husband and my sister are having an affair, and you want me to be reasonable?" Dad cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "Well, you've never wanted children, darling. And James, he always dreamed of being a father. Maybe it's for the best. When was the last time you even cooked dinner for him?" My breath caught in my throat. Sarah grinned, smug, pregnant with my husband's child, and it seemed she already knew how it would end. "I'll be a real wife," she said, and smiled. I slowly turned to them, to these people whom I called family. "A real wife? How is your precious Sarah, who is lounging in your house and sleeping with her sister's husband?" Sarah rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Patricia. Just get back to your big office and your important meetings. Leave family matters to people who really care about them." I looked at her, at Mom, at Dad. And for the first time in my life, I realized that I was standing alone. I barely remember driving home from my parents' house, because reality suddenly lost its shape, dissolved like blurred paint on a wet canvas, turned into a ghostly, intangible nightmare from which I could not wake up, but could only helplessly watch my life crumble, my life, the one I was building. For so long, with such tenacity, with such faith that the right decisions will lead me to the right future. The world around me seemed unreal, the movements were mechanical, and I found myself thinking that everything that was happening looked more like a scene from someone else's movie than my reality. When I entered the apartment where I lived with the man I once loved, with the man I trusted, it seemed to me that nothing had changed inside. Everything was in its place. The dark gray sofa on which we once lazily lay in the evenings, discussing plans for the future, a blanket that he casually threw off an armchair, forgetting to put away, a couple of glasses on the kitchen table, left from last night's dinner. It seemed like this world wasn't affected by what I learned today, but I knew it would never be the same again. James was there in the living room, completely calm, acting as if it was just an ordinary Saturday, as if nothing had happened, as if my faith in him, in us, in the meaning of family hadn't collapsed. "Hi, honey," he said, getting up from the couch and coming over to hug me, with that smile I knew so well, that I once loved, that now made my stomach clench. I stepped back, clutching his second phone in my hand, and watched as something changed in his eyes, as at first he did not understand, then he recognized, and then fear appeared. "Do you want to explain it?" His face contorted for a moment, as if he was trying to find the right words, but I'd already seen everything I needed to see. "Where did you find him?" "During cleaning." "You really should find more convenient places to hide your phones for novels." "Patricia, I can explain." "Explain what?" "Messages? Photos? Or maybe I should explain how you got my sister pregnant." He first tried to deny it, as they all do, in a last, pathetic attempt to save something that could no longer be saved. "It wasn't me, I didn't see it." But he must have seen something in my face, because suddenly his demeanor changed, his posture, his voice, everything became different. The mask slipped off, leaving in front of me a man whom, as it turned out, I had never known. "Okay," he said abruptly, no longer trying to justify himself, but simply shrugging off the whole farce. I felt a wave of anger rise in me, but I didn't let it overwhelm me. I stood up straight, clenched my fists and squeezed through my teeth. "What did you expect?" "What did I expect?" James grinned like I was crazy. "You're never at home, Patricia. All you care about is work, work, work. When was the last time we actually talked about starting a family?" I grinned back, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, so it's my fault? Did you cheat on me because I wanted financial stability before having children?" "You've never wanted children," he snapped. "Actually, you always had some excuses, a house, savings, the right time. Sarah really wants a family. She understands what is important in life." I looked at this man, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and felt nothing but icy, paralyzing disgust. "What is important in life?" I whispered, feeling something break inside me, but it hadn't completely crumbled yet. "Loyalty. Honor. Basic human decency. But it doesn't seem to make any difference to you or my sister." "Don't be so arrogant," he growled, losing control. "You're just mad because Sarah gave me something you didn't want." The divorce papers were filed the next day. I used the fact of cheating, and therefore everything went quickly. Mike and David, my brothers, came to help me move out of the apartment, and they were the only ones standing nearby. While we were packing, the atmosphere in the room was heavy, as if a thunderstorm had rolled in. "We always knew Sarah was spoiled," Mike muttered as he taped one of the boxes shut. "But this is the bottom." David couldn't even pronounce her name. "They're dead to me," he said in a flat, calm voice, and I knew he wasn't exaggerating. "Through them, I learned news that I never wanted to know, but couldn't avoid." James and Sarah got married in a modest ceremony, attended by my parents, beaming with pride. The child was born, a girl. They moved into a small house in the suburbs. Tommy started calling James Daddy. "Mom's still trying to get us to visit them," Mike said during one of our monthly dinners. "He says that we should become a family again." David raised his glass and looked at us. "We are already a family. There are 3 of us. That's enough." I nodded, grateful for their loyalty in a world where loyalty no longer meant anything. We were the only ones who understood that some betrayals could not be forgiven, that some bridges could not be rebuilt, that some families were better left in the past. Years can change a lot. My new apartment overlooked the city skyline, and every morning when I opened the curtains, the sun flooded the rooms with warm golden light, reflecting off the glass walls and turning the entire interior into a radiant space filled with air and light. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the metropolis. The marble countertops in the kitchen chilled my skin when I ran my hand over them, and the space finally allowed me to arrange the collection of works of art that I had been carefully collecting for years, postponing this moment until I could afford an apartment worthy of them. My new Mercedes glittered in the reserved parking space below, reflecting the soft garage lights, and every time I got out of the elevator, I felt an inner pride for what I had achieved fill me from the inside. I did everything as planned. I got out of that past, in which there was nothing but obligations to. In other words, I built my life from scratch, without looking back, without regrets, without the desire to ever come back. Mike and David often came to visit, bringing with them news and rumors, which I did not ask, but always received. I listened to them with a slight detachment, more out of habit than out of real interest. Sarah and James, they said, were struggling to make ends meet. 3 moves in 2 years, each apartment smaller than the last, bills they couldn't always pay on time, the ever-increasing cost of children, the tension they could no longer hide. I listened, nodded, and sometimes asked routine questions, but there was no gloating or sympathy inside me. It no longer concerned me. Their lives were no longer my concern, and I had no desire to remind them of their mistakes or gloat over their problems. I just moved on. And yet, when on Tuesday evening my phone lit up with a number that I hoped I would never see again, I felt something shrink inside me, as if fate, pleased with my low, decided to test my strength once more. James's voice was the same as I remembered it, a little lower than before, a little more tired, but still painfully familiar. "Patricia," he said, and my body froze, but I didn't hang up, even though I should have. "Please don't hang up." I was silent. "We need your help," he continued, and those words, "we need your help," sounded so ridiculous that I wanted to laugh. "Sarah was in an accident. It's a complicated fracture, she's had surgery, but she can't move, she can't take care of the kids, and she's pregnant again." I sat with the phone pressed to my ear, feeling an icy, unshakable calm slowly build up in me, like a person who suddenly realized that he was standing on top of a high mountain and looking down to where the storm was raging below, but it no longer concerned him. "The kids need someone who can pick them up from school and look after them until I get home from work," James continued, as if he hadn't noticed my silence. "Tommy's getting too big to handle everything on his own, and with the arrival of a new baby." He paused. "We thought maybe you could help." I blinked slowly. "Have we thought?" My voice sounded frighteningly calm. "They're your nephews, Patricia, your family," James spoke quickly, as if he was afraid I'd break off the conversation. "Sarah can't even walk to the bathroom on her own right now." "My family?" I repeated, as if trying these words to taste. "The sister who slept with my husband? And the husband who cheated on me? Is this my family?" He exhaled, annoyed, and his tone instantly changed from pleading to accusing. "Don't be like that," he said sharply. "It's not about us, it's about innocent children who need help. Are you too selfish to take care of them?" I felt laughter bubbling up inside me. "Am I being selfish?" I nodded slowly, passing the word through myself, feeling its absurdity. "It sounds familiar." "We're fighting, Patricia," he continued, now with a distinct note of self-pity in his voice. "You know how expensive children are. I work overtime to feed everyone. We can't even afford a normal apartment, and you live in your luxury apartment with a cool car. And here it is. That's the thing, isn't it?" I let my voice cool, become icy. "Money. Not everyone can focus only on their career," he said bitterly. "Some of us have real responsibilities." I chuckled. It must be great to have all this, but to have no one to spend it on but yourself, he continued, now clearly angry. It must be nice to have a family that you stole and not be able to support it, I replied coldly. He paused, and into that silence I said, "It sounds like a real dream come true. Children need help." He blurted out desperately, as if that could make a difference. Children need parents who have not built their relationships on betrayal. I pressed the end call button right in the middle of his objections and immediately blocked the number before he could call again. But a few minutes later, the phone rang again, and this time the name on the screen made me freeze. Mom. I sighed, exhaled slowly, and even though I knew it was better not to answer, that it wouldn't lead to anything good, I picked up the phone anyway. It's an old habit that I've never been able to completely get rid of. "Patricia," she said, as she always said when she needed something. "Something to talk about." "Sarah, she needs help." My mother's voice sounded careful, as if she was choosing her words, trying not to offend me, but at the same time clearly making it clear that a conversation was inevitable. "James called you, didn't he?" I gripped the phone tighter, both annoyed and tired, because it had been a long day, and the last few years of my life seemed to have taught me that if my mom was calling, it meant she had a request that I definitely didn't want to listen to. I paced the living room slowly, resisting the urge to hang up immediately. "Yes, he called," I replied in a flat voice, trying not to betray the anger that was rising inside. "And I told him it wasn't my problem." There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost imagine my mother wrinkling her forehead, biting her lip, and then, taking a deep breath, speaking in the tone I knew so well, the tone she always used to appeal to my conscience. "How can you be so cold? She's your sister. She's struggling, she has 3 children, she's going to have 3 soon." "The sister who slept with my husband?" I interrupted her, not hiding my sarcasm. Mom sighed heavily, as if I was talking about something insignificant, something that no longer has any weight. "That was years ago, Patricia," she said wearily, as if that automatically made the situation less disgusting. "You need to put this in the past. We are a family." I chuckled. It's funny how family only starts to matter when you need something from me. Mom sighed again, but this time there was a tired, broken note in her voice, as if she wasn't sure if she wanted to continue this conversation. "We helped her as much as we could," she said, and I immediately understood where she was going. "But it's not enough," I finished for her. She stopped talking, but I heard her breathing become a little more uneven, as if she was trying to keep from saying something she would regret later. "She's asking for money," Mom finally said. "For children, for rent, for everything. We spent all our savings. Your father and I, we can't go on." I couldn't help but laugh. That's it. Is the golden child finally becoming too expensive to maintain? "Don't be cruel, Patricia," her mother said, sounding annoyed. "She's just. She never learned. Work." I finished for her. "Support yourself. Taking responsibility for your actions." Mom stopped talking, and I realized that I had hit the nail on the head. "Oh, I wonder why." I added coldly. "She just keeps having kids." There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line, and for the first time in a long time, I heard something in my mother's voice that hadn't been there before. "She doesn't want to look for a job," she confessed, and there was a strange, painful disappointment in those words. "She says she's too busy with the kids. But she always asks for money. He always wants something." I chuckled. "Sounds like the man you raised." "You have no right to talk to me like that." My mother's voice rose sharply, and I heard the sharpness she only had when she felt cornered. "I have no right?" I repeated, enjoying the way the words enveloped me in icy calm. "And whose fault is it that Sarah has become like this? Who taught her that she would never have to work for something, that someone would always get her out of trouble? We did our best. Mom exclaimed. No, I interrupted. I did my best. And now you're calling me because the monster you created is too expensive to feed. You have a duty to help your family. Mom was almost screaming. After all we've done for you. Everything you've done for me. I felt anger wash over me. For example, supporting my sister when she was having an affair with my husband? Or maybe the fact that they called me selfish when I wanted financial stability before having children? There was dead silence on the other end. I don't owe you anything. I hung up before she could answer. His hand was shaking. 4 years old. 4 years of pension insurance, investment strategies, cold-blooded calculations, thoughtful plans. And so I stood at the panoramic window of my apartment, looked at the city stretched out below me, at the lights of cars twinkling below, and realized that this was my life. Built by me, without their help, without their approval, without their expectations. Later that evening, Mike called me. You'll never guess who tried to call me today. I knew it. Sarah, I replied in a flat voice. He snorted. Bingo. I leaned back on the couch, sipping my wine, and closed my eyes. What did she want? Oh, the standard despair tour, he muttered. She wanted me to help with the children. Maybe he lent them some money until they'd get back on their feet. He chuckled, and I imagined him shaking his head. As if they've ever been on their feet. And what did you tell her? That's what David told her yesterday. I opened my eyes. And what's that? Mike sighed. That some betrayals can't be fixed. That what she did to you was not just cheating, but the destruction of a family. I was silent, and he added. She started crying. She said we were cruel. That the family should help the family. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. And what did you say? I reminded her that she didn't seem too worried about family when she was sleeping with your husband. I heard him reach for his glass. Anyway, it looks like we have a new family outcast. I smiled. Welcome to the club. I leaned back in my office chair, looking at the lights of the city stretching out below me like a shimmering sea in which every movement was alien and far away, and listened to Mike's voice on the phone telling me that everything happened as we expected. How did she take it? I asked, knowing the answer in advance. As expected, he snorted, and I heard him raise the glass to his lips. At first, she screamed that we were all against her, that no one understood how hard her life was, that we were selfish, heartless people who had abandoned her. And then she started crying. I remained silent, letting him continue. But do you know what the most interesting thing is? His voice was a little lower, a little heavier. Karma has finally caught up with her. I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, waiting for him to continue. 2 weeks after she sobbed into the phone, David brought the news that you probably already guessed. They moved in with Mom and Dad. I closed my eyes. All of them? That's it. Sarah, James, the kids, the baby is coming. I exhaled slowly, the faintest hint of mockery in my voice. Dad is converting his workshop into another bedroom. How sweet, I said, letting his words pass through me, but feeling nothing but tired indifference. Mom and Dad are now working as babysitters and ATM machines, Mike added. Do you remember how peacefully their retirement was supposed to go? I smiled into the phone, knowing he'd grin too. Well, they have a different life now. Mom is looking after the kids while Sarah is getting better. His voice was filled with slight sarcasm. Which apparently means scrolling through her phone all day. And Dad spends money from retirement savings to cover expenses. I shook my head. They made their choice. Yeah, but they're not happy about the consequences, Mike continued. Mom came to see me yesterday. I was wondering if I could talk to you about helping. I laughed. Are they depressed? Oh, yeah, Mike chuckled. I'm sure they're depressed. The next day, Mom showed up on my doorstep without warning. I barely recognized her. She looked older, tired in a way that went beyond the usual physical exhaustion. Her eyes, once full of confidence and unquestionable maternal authority, were now filled with anxiety, sleepless nights, and the burden of decisions she had made for years without ever thinking about the consequences. Please, she began before I could speak, just listen. No, I interrupted her, not even softening my voice. You listen to me. She froze. You chose all of this, Mom. You decided to let Sarah do whatever she wants. You supported her when she betrayed me. You let them move in. It's your choice. I took a step towards the door, indicating with my whole appearance that the conversation was over. Live with them, I added. And if you show up on my doorstep again, I'll call the police. She tried to protest. But, Patricia, the next time you feel depressed, remember that it was your choice. You chose a daughter who betrayed her sister instead of one who always worked hard and did the right thing. Now live with it. I closed the door without waiting for her answer. And then I blocked her number. The last family room I still had, besides Mike and David. That night, I had dinner with Marcus, the man I'd been dating for the past few months, the one who didn't demand the impossible from me, didn't push, didn't rush, just listened, just understood. I told him about the latest events, without softening the details, without trying to make them less ugly, and when I stopped talking, he reached across the table and took my hand in his. Family isn't always who you were born with, he said, looking me straight in the eye. Sometimes it's the ones you choose. I squeezed his hand back, thinking about Mike and David, how they had never distanced themselves from me, betrayed me, or taken a convenient side. Thinking about Marcus, who didn't try to fix me, didn't tell me that I needed to let go of the past, didn't condemn my decisions, but was just there for me. Thinking about the life I've built on my own terms. After all, Sarah didn't steal my family from me. She just helped me see which parts of her were worth saving. Mike and David are coming this weekend, I said, looking up at Marcus. Would you like to join us? His smile was enough of an answer. And for the first time in a long time, I felt really free.